Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and these are the latest headlines. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has met with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump in Florida ahead of his inauguration on January 20. Meloni is among the first leaders Trump has hosted as president-elect following earlier meetings with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Argentine President Javier Milei, among others. Footage shared on social media shows Trump escorting Meloni at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Italian media reported that Meloni intended to discuss topics such as Moscow's war against Ukraine, the Middle East, and trade. Trump and Meloni also attended a screening of a documentary about a former Trump lawyer who played a pivotal role in Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. The visit precedes Meloni's planned talks with President Joe Biden in Rome later this week. Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer has announced his resignation following the collapse of coalition talks to form a new government. This marks the second failure of such negotiations, with divisions over economic and policy matters proving insurmountable. Nehammer made the announcement in a post on social media platform X, stating that consensus on key points was unattainable. His decision came after protracted negotiations between his Conservative People's Party and the Social Democrats broke down, particularly following the unexpected withdrawal of the Liberal Neos Party. So let's hear the statement from the Austrian Chancellor.
My election campaign and my political activities were and are characterized by being the force of the political center in order to build a bulwark against the radicals. It is my deep conviction that radicals do not offer a solution to any problem, but only live by describing problems. This is bad for Austria, and it is bad for the people in our country.
Poland has officially commenced its presidency of the Council of the European Union with an inauguration gala held in Warsaw on Friday. During the event, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and European Council President Antonio Costa emphasized that security and support for Ukraine will be the Council's top priorities over the next 6 months.
All eyes are on Warsaw as Poland begins its presidency of the Council of the European Union. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk came out on stage during the inauguration gala on Friday with the weight of responsibility on his shoulders.
Yes, there are great expectations in Europe for the Polish presidency, but today from here, from Warsaw, I would like to address this question to the whole of Europe, to all Europeans. Are you all ready to re-enter the European path of greatness, strength and sovereignty? Because Poland is ready.
Poland has taken over the presidency from Hungary, which has been going against the current in the EU, especially when it comes to supporting Ukraine in the war with Russia. A sense of relief can be felt among EU officials, with Warsaw taking charge.
In fact, there is no better time for Polish leadership in the European Union, because the vitality of Polish democracy and its sense of national identity make the European Union stronger.
The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, stressed that aid for Ukraine will remain the focus of the European Union in the coming months.
That is why I have called for an informal meeting of the European leaders in the beginning of February, dedicated to the topic of defense. The Secretary General of NATO, and as you suggested, dear Donald, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will join us for parts of that meeting.
Poland's slogan for the presidency is Security Europe. This can be broken down into 7 branches: defense, border protection, disinformation, economy, energy, agriculture and health. Out of these, defense and energy are expected to be the 2 focal points for Warsaw.
In terms of energy, I think it's important to really becoming independent from sources from third countries and diversify the energy mix in a way that it allows European Union and its members to feel safe about the level of energy which is provided on a daily basis.
The Council of the European Union is different from the European Council. The former gathers ministers from all 27 member states who decide the EU's foreign policies as well as adopt the bloc's budget and legislation. The European Council is made up of leaders of the EU countries, but it has no legislative power. It instead deals with sudden crises like the war in Ukraine or the COVID-19 pandemic. Poland is taking over the presidency of the Council of the European Union at a pivotal time for the fate of Ukraine. US President-elect Donald Trump, who will return to office on January 20th, said he wants to end the war in Ukraine in 2025, no matter what. Warsaw wants to make sure it will happen with Kyiv's and Europe's best interest guaranteed.
Ukrainian pilots and ground crew have completed 6 months of training on French Mirage 2000 fighter jets, with the first jets expected to arrive in Ukraine this month. It remains uncertain how many jets Ukraine will receive. Kyiv has requested 12, but media reports suggest it could be only 6. This addition to Ukraine's arsenal follows ongoing deliveries of F-16 fighter jets. The Mirage and F-16 aircraft are anticipated to significantly enhance Ukraine's aerial defense capabilities. The number of Ukrainians willing to concede territories to Russia in exchange for peace has seen a significant rise, according to a study by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology. At the start of 2024, 26% of respondents expressed support for this idea. By December, nearly 2/5 of the population were in favor. Our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Kadiji, has this report.
A new poll published by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology has revealed that the number of Ukrainians who would consider agreeing to territorial concessions to end the war with Russia has increased since the autumn, the last time the poll was issued by the same institute. Now, the number of Ukrainian respondents that said they would be willing to accept territorial concessions to end the war with Russia was 38%. That's up on 32% in October. Now, it does show that over time this number has increased steadily. If you go back 2 years ago to when the war began, or rather at the end of 2022, the number of respondents who said they were willing to accept territorial concessions was 8%. So that number has steadily increased over time. However, it must be said that the majority of Ukrainians polled, 51% in this poll, still oppose territorial concessions to Russia. Now, this poll has been released shortly before Donald Trump is sworn in for his second term as US president, and he has vowed to end the war in Ukraine quickly through negotiations. These polls do indicate that Ukrainians are willing to consider in larger numbers these kinds of concessions maybe to end the war, but also Ukrainians when polled, also believe that territorial concessions won't be enough to end the war in and of themselves. So therefore, a lot of work to do here with regards to any kind of potential peace negotiations. But as far as the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology's polling is concerned, there are a steadily increasing number of Ukrainians who are willing to accept these kinds of concessions for a peace deal with Russia. It's Oz Kadiji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Thousands of protesters gathered in Bratislava on Friday to express their opposition to Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico's December meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. The unrest has been amplified by Fico's unexplained absence from Slovakia since the meeting, fueling speculation that he may be indulging in a luxurious retreat.
The Friday demonstration gathered approximately 4,000 protesters in front of the government office in Bratislava. The protest was organized by the activist group Peace for Ukraine, which argues that Prime Minister Robert Fico's trip to Moscow has weakened the country's position within the EU. TVP World interviewed one of the protesters to capture the sentiment of the demonstration.
This message was very clear that Robert Fico is conducting its own personal policies, but he doesn't represent the interests and the hopes of the population. We belong to European Union, we belong to NATO, we are a democratic society.
On paper, Fico's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin seemingly revolved around energy developments. After Ukraine decided not to extend its gas transit agreement with Russia beyond 2024, Fico hinted at potential retaliatory measures, including cutting off electricity supplies to Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Fico of acting on Putin's orders.
In world politics, it absolutely applies that it does not matter whether elephants laugh or fight. The grass always suffers. I do not want Slovakia to be such grass, as we see these days when the transit of gas through Ukraine is stopped, which will have drastic impacts on all of us in the European Union, but not on the Russian Federation.
Nonetheless, the true purpose of Fico's Moscow visit remains ambiguous.
It's very difficult to believe that the main purpose of his trip to Moscow was actually to discuss the gas, because this is not possible without discussing this with Ukraine. I don't think that the price of gas could ever be compared to the price that the Ukrainians have to pay every day.
But despite multiple addresses on the gas situation in the recent days, Fico has not been seen in Slovakia since his trip to Moscow. According to Dennik N's analysis of his latest video on the room setup, it appears that Fico may be in Hanoi, Vietnam, staying in a luxury hotel where nightly rates can exceed €6,000.
It's unbelievable because it's against all protocols. The Prime Minister is still in function. Maybe if he would have a holiday, vacation, it's okay, but he didn't announce, he didn't notify. Even the members of the ruling coalition didn't know, where he is, where he was.
On Saturday, Slovakian President Peter Pellegrini said he was aware of Fico's location and that he had been informed of the length of his leave, but he declined to reveal his whereabouts. This is not the first protest on the topic, as Slovaks already rallied against Fico's Moscow meeting in December. It is also unlikely to be the last. On the 10th of January, a much bigger protest titled "We Want a Different Government" is expected.
Romania and Bulgaria's full membership in the Schengen zone marks a major step forward, offering expanded visa-free travel for millions of EU citizens. However, this development does not mean an end to all border checks. Just days after Romania officially decommissioned its custom posts, police launched a series of operations aimed at protecting the bloc.
Romania's border police out in force, questioning those returning home and heading back to work after the New Year break. The checks came as a surprise, just days after the country fully joined the EU's Schengen visa-free zone.
They asked me where exactly I was going. They checked my documents and that's it. Maybe they are necessary, but it's surprising for the second, third day of Schengen access. They stopped us for a check to see if our passports were in order. I say it's okay. These random checks also happen in Austria. They stopped us for a routine check. They asked for our documents. In short, this is good.
Checks on travelling by air and sea from Bulgaria and Romania were lifted in March last year. But land checks continued until Vienna in December dropped objections on the grounds that more was needed to stop irregular migration. Now Bucharest is putting its pledge to protect the bloc's borders into action.
These checks are carried out within 30 kilometers of the border and aim to verify identities and legal situations for persons crossing the border, as well as preventing and combating illegal acts.
The Romanian Interior Ministry carries out checks near the main Romanian border crossing points in the south and west of the country in order to identify illegal migrant transports or other illegal activities, such as smuggling.
Random spot checks were also conducted in 5 other Romanian counties. While visa-free travel has become easier, officials are aiming to close the gap for smugglers and traffickers.
And with that, we conclude this edition of World News. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.